Well, shalom, friends. This is Daniel again with Bless Israel Network. And this is another episode of My View as a Jew. Today, we're going to talk about some Islamic terminology. These days, Islam and terrorism and Muslim and et cetera, is all over the news. A day doesn't go by where you don't hear something about it, either on the news or political circles or religious community or online or what have you. So I thought that I would share with you some terms, some of which you're probably familiar with and you may know, others you may not be familiar with. And as Michael Corleone in The Godfather once said, "My father taught me to keep my friends close, but my enemies closer." So in other words, know exactly what they're doing. And it's important to understand some of these things so you have the correct meaning and what have you. That way, if you engage with someone, hopefully you'll be able to speak from a position of being informed, okay? So we're just going to go down a list of various terms and what have you, and I'll just share them with you, and hopefully this will be something that blesses you. So we'll start right off with Allah, okay? Some like to say Allah, some say Allah, okay? What and who is Allah? My Muslim friends pronounce it Allah. I do have some Muslim friends, believe it or not. Allah is the Islamic term for God, yet we need to be very, very careful, okay? They view him and they have a number of different characteristics associated with him, up to 99 different ones. But here's the proof of the pudding. Allah does not literally translate to the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Okay? Allah is actually a combination of a couple of different moon gods that were combined. Muhammad himself actually shortened the two words and turned it into Allah. So, but the important takeaway here is Allah is not the God of the Bible. Allah is not the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Allah is a separate moon god that the Muslims worship as their God. So it's important to know that. You've heard the term Allahu Akbar. This is repeated constantly when you hear about terrorist attacks. The terrorist in many cases will shout out Allahu Akbar before he commits his terrorist murderous act. Well, Allahu Akbar, actually, they say it means Allah is the most great or God is great, etc., etc. In fact, it really translates into God, their God, Allah, is greater than any other God. So forget about comparing Allah to the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Their God, Allah, is considered separate, unique, exclusive, and superior to any other God. Ayatollah. What's an Ayatollah? Well, this is relatively simple. It's a spiritual leader like rabbi or reverend or what have you. Only an Ayatollah is a spiritual leader amongst the Shiite Muslims, not the Sunni Muslims. Shiite Muslims make up about 18% of the world's 1.65 billion Muslims, and Sunnis represent about 85% roughly of the rest of the world's Muslims. And the mother country, the quote homeland of the Shiite Muslims is Iran. Henceforth, the leaders are called the Ayatollahs. Okay? And the mother country of Sunni Islam is Saudi Arabia, where Mecca is. Okay? Well, let's move on down this list. What's a caliphate? And who is the caliph? A caliphate is the complete global concept of what would be, I guess, a kingdom if you will, in the Islamic world, where it is totally dominated and controlled by Islam, and it is ruled by Sharia law. And so this is, in essence, a Muslim-led world, if you will, a caliphate. And the leader of the caliphate is the caliph. Okay, hopefully that makes sense. Let's see. You ever heard the term Dar al-Harb? D-A-R-A-L-H-A-R-B. It's a Muslim term for the house of war. House of war. And frankly, between you and I, this is what Islam is all about. It's about house of war. And I don't care what you hear, okay? While there are some Muslims that are peaceful and nonviolent, Islam itself is not a peaceful religion, not if you follow it to the full tenets and practice exactly as it is laid out. It is not a peaceful way of life. What is a dhimmi, or who are dhimmis? And that's spelled D-H-I-M-M-I-S. These are conquered people. So in other words, if Islam takes over a country and they become in control, those who are subjugated under them are considered dhimmis. Now, in many cases where one group of people controls another, the ones who are subjugated have a lot of rights and freedoms and so on and so forth. Well, under Islam, dhimmis do not. They are second-class citizens. They must pay protection money, and they are never, ever considered quote-unquote citizens or on equal status with Muslims. Islam, again, considers itself to be unique and superior to every other religion. So dhimmis are actually subjugated second-class citizens who are controlled by the Muslims. You ever heard the term fatwa? Okay, fatwa isn't necessarily by definition a death sentence, okay? A fatwa is, let me give you an example. If you're familiar with Judaism, okay, rabbis issue decrees all the time, and there are different sects of Judaism, and each one has their own set of kosher laws and rulings and edicts and what have you. So the same is true in Islam. A fatwa, while many people consider it to be a death sentence, it's actually a legal ruling which is provided by or initiated by an imam or a Muslim leader. And they're independent and they issue fatwas all the time. So it's really a legal ruling as opposed to a quote-unquote, by implication, death sentence. Hadith. What is the hadith? The hadith is a collection of Muhammad's sayings and deeds, typically known as the traditions, if you will. Okay, so this is part of the Islamic worship. Hadith is spelled H-A-D-I-T-H. Hajj. What's a Hajj? H-A-J-J. You ever see videos on the news of that black monument in the middle of Mecca and Muslims are marching around it? That is called the Kaaba. And the pilgrimage to Mecca, which every Muslim is supposed to make at least once in their life, that is called a Hajj, where they go and they march around the Kaaba. Again, Hajj, H-A-J-J, Hajj. Going alphabetically here, Hudna. Now this is a term that you will not typically find on the average Muslim source or website. Hudna is more of a clandestine or secretive term. Let me give you an example. Several times over the course of the years, you've known that Israel and Hamas and other Islamic terrorist groups have engaged in conflict. You've also noticed that there's never been any formal peace treaties signed with Hamas, Hezbollah. There have been formal peace treaties signed with sovereign nations like Jordan, Egypt, etc., but never with the terrorist organizations. Why? Because they are committed to the destruction of Israel and the Jewish people. They will stop engaging in hostilities when it suits their interest to stop, without giving up or giving in on anything, just stopping the hostilities. And they do this with the intention of patiently waiting until it's in their best interest to resume hostilities again. And this is what's known as a hudna. H-U-D-N-A, hudna. Who's an imam? An imam is someone who believes and is a leader in the religious community. That's an imam, I-M-A-N. How about the word Islam itself? Do you know what it means? Islam itself actually means submission. Submission. So much for free will, huh? God gave Jews and Christians free will. Islam, there is no such thing as free will. You obey or that's it. There is no negotiating, okay? So Islam is actually the combination of Silam or Silm, S-I-L-M, and Salam, S-A-L-A-M, and again, it means submission. Jihad. Does jihad automatically mean violence and war? Not necessarily, okay? Not necessarily. As Muslims see it, this is a struggle. Okay, so a struggle is actually an effort to accomplish something. Now, typically speaking, the way jihad is played out today, it is violent. I mean, all of the terrorism that you see, this is part of jihad. Now, also, if you have classroom environments where they are teaching the Muslim way and why it's superior in their belief and why it needs to be in control, this is also part of jihad. It's basically a struggle, but in most cases, it's actually played out in the form of violence, okay? And they might call it, someone might call it a holy war, which I think is appropriate, but the apologists for Islam will say, no. It's not violent. It's not a holy war. It's just a struggle. Well, these days, as we all know, Islam is engaged in a holy war against everything that isn't Islamic or Muslim. As I mentioned earlier, the Kaaba, that is the black stone. Muslims believe it was the first house of worship built by, guess who? Adam. Yeah. Never mind what you read in the Bible, okay? Muslims believe that Allah directed Adam to build this black stone, okay? And it was torn down, actually it was destroyed, and it was subsequently to that, it was reconstructed, get this, by Abraham and Ishmael. Yeah. Did you know that Abraham went to Mecca and that he did not make an effort to sacrifice his son Isaac on Mount Moriah? That it actually took place in Mecca and that it was Ishmael, not his son Isaac? This is what the Muslims believe, my friends. Quran, and that's spelled different ways, sometimes K-O-R-A-N, other times Q-U-R-A-N. This is the Muslim holy book. Now, I'm not going to say equivalent to our Bible, but in terms of how it's perceived, in terms of holiness and what have you, it is considered the Muslim holy book. These are revelations, a series of revelations given to the, quote, Prophet Muhammad over a period of roughly 23 years, which began, I believe, in 1608 or 09, and as I said, went on for about 23 years. And Muhammad died in 1632. So the Quran is a series of revelations given to the Prophet Muhammad that came from the angel Gabriel. Okay, so they want to consider that holy. I think you and I have a different, more appropriate definition of what is holy, but that's how the Quran is perceived. A mosque, it's like a church, if you will. In other words, a place of worship, like a synagogue. It's considered their house of worship. Only today, these days, you don't hear the term mosque used so much as you hear the term Islamic center. And that's because the term mosque has kind of taken on a sort of disturbing connotation. So less offensive or less disturbing is the term Islamic center. Trust me, nothing has changed about what goes on inside, okay? Muhammad, who is Muhammad? Well, Muhammad is considered the prophet, okay? And the prophet is untouchable, unrecognizable. Images of him are forbidden. As I said in another message, you remember what happened to those Danish cartoonists who drew images of him? They were eventually attacked and they were murdered. Muhammad is untouchable. See, the thing about Islam is that it is considered, quote, the only true religion. Allah is considered the only true God. Quran is considered the only true holy book. Muhammad is considered the only true prophet. He's not the Son of God. He's not like Jesus, Yeshua, where he is the Son of the living God. But he is considered the only true prophet of God, Muhammad. A Muslim, pretty simple, a person who practices Islam. Ramadan. Ramadan is a month of fasting, which is observed in the 9th month of the Islamic calendar. And the reason it's practiced is because Muslims believe that it was during this month that the Quranic revelations to Muhammad began. Typically, during Ramadan, Muslims will fast during daylight and eat only in the evenings, and it's a period of 30 days. Salam is their version of shalom. It means peace. Okay, well, so much for their version of peace. Sharia. You ever heard the term Sharia law? What is Sharia law? This is Islamic law, or what they will call the divine path or obedience to God. Sharia law, if you examine it, okay, is what is practiced within a caliphate. In other words, let's say the United States as an example. There are laws, there are amendments, there's a constitution, you have the Bill of Rights, etc. You have a judicial system, so on and so forth. Under Sharia law, no such thing. You obey the Quran, period. Period. There is no compromising, there's no fudging, there's no watering down. You obey the Quran in its literal sense. Now, you've heard the term fundamentalist. You've heard the term radical. Let me explain. There is no such thing as a radical in the Islamic world. What? Yes, that's true. you are either a fundamentalist, or if not, you are considered an infidel. Only those who live by the strict tenets of Islam, including obedience to every aspect of Sharia law, which includes honor killings, where if your daughter is dating a non-Muslim and you as the father tell your son to go kill your daughter because she's bringing dishonor to the family, that he has to do that. The end-all authority in the Islamic world is the father. And after the authority of the father comes the local imam. After that comes the local tribe or clan. And after that comes the government. The father is the ultimate source. And under Sharia law, you must obey the father. There is no court that is going to adjudicate a decision that will go against Sharia law, not unless it's a totally secular environment. And in the Islamic world, they don't exist. So Sharia law requires strict adherence. Now, as far as radicals versus fundamentalists is concerned, radical is a term invented in the West, and it is meant to describe or refer to what most people in the Islamic world consider to be fundamentalist. In other words, if you are a devout believer and follower of every aspect of Islam, which includes committing jihad, which includes committing murder in the name of Allah, then you are a fundamentalist. But the West calls that a radical. But in the Islamic world, there's no such thing as a radical. You're either a believer or you're an infidel. Taqiyya. What is taqiyya? It's a term you don't often hear. Taqiyya is, again, one of these more secretive kind of Islamic terms. What it is, it allows a Muslim, a devout Muslim, once a Muslim has sworn their heart to Allah, it allows that Muslim to break any written or oral agreement. It allows a Muslim, a dedicated Muslim, to lie, okay? You remember when Yasser Arafat came to the United States when Ehud Barak was Prime Minister of Israel and President Clinton took them out to Camp David and they went into an extended period of negotiations, and at the end of that whole process, in spite of the fact that Ehud Barak made an incredibly generous offer, one that President Clinton said was even too good to be true from his perspective, Arafat still rejected it. After those negotiations collapsed, Arafat was on a subsequent trip to South Africa, and a number of Muslims attacked him, and they were furious that he was even willing to sit and talk and be willing to compromise with a Jewish leader of Israel. And he said, don't worry, even if we had signed an agreement, I would have practiced taqiyya, which is the Muslim way of saying I would have dishonored the agreement, I would have lied, I would have broken it. Taqiyya, typically spelled T-A-K-I-Y-Y-A. You can look it up. Well, since we've come to the end of these terms, I hope that I haven't given you too much information. Feel free to look any or all of these up, okay? But I believe it's important that we as believers really understand some of this terminology that we hear casually thrown around these days. So I hope this message has blessed you. If it has, please feel free to go to our website, send us your comments, sign up for our mailing list, and if God leads you, please feel free to make a donation and support our ministry. Bye-bye for now. Shalom from Israel.